What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, RegulatorBlu, and you're watching Cover to Cover. So in this pilot episode, we will be reviewing Superman Up in the Sky by the legendary writer Tom King and the epic artist Andy Kubert in great detail. So if you want to avoid any spoilers, this is your only warning. Alright, now let's begin with the first impression. Up in the Sky isn't just another copy and paste adventure from the comics. It's a deeply emotional mediation on what makes the Man of Steel a true hero, and it lends credence to who Superman is at his core. This miniseries is bold, heartfelt, and unapologetically brutal, but does this arc fail to elevate the last son of Krypton's legacy further, or is it a banger space odyssey that deserves its flowers? So the story begins in issue 1, part 1, Alice. Superman was doing the rounds in Metropolis when he gets a call from Batman. When the two meet up on a rooftop in Gotham, Batman informs Superman that a home invasion took place in his city the night before. An elderly couple fostering 4 children somewhere in Gotham were murdered along with 2 of their daughters. One girl is missing and the other was hospitalized after being shot. After their brief conversation, the Man of Steel leaves the Dark Knight to go visit the gunshot victim at Gotham Mercy General. When he arrives, she tells Big Blue that a man in a spaceman suit hurt her family, and kidnapped her sister Alice. Faced with a gut-wrenching choice, Superman weighs his duty to protect the people of Earth against his desperate need to save a single child. As Big Blue spoke with Green Lantern Hal Jordan and later Pa Kent about this dilemma, Alice's sister unfortunately passed away due to her injuries. Later on that evening, Superman, while on a date with Lois Lane sitting atop the Daily Planet, talks to her about Alice and how long he would be gone for. Lois ultimately supports her partner's decision and promises him that she'll try not to fall off of any buildings while he's away. The issue ends the following day at a local park where a little blonde boy calls after Superman, who flies up and away in search of Alice. Part 2, Just Luck, picks up with Superman on the planet Rann. There, Big Blue is greeted by a scientist named Sardath, who informs Superman that his efforts in attempting to track a Zeta beam had failed, ultimately destroying the Computo 3. In an act of sheer desperation and bravery, Superman asks Sardath to hook him up to the machine. However, the scientist attempts to discourage him, informing Big Blue that all that data running through his mind would drive him mad. Superman refuses to be deterred by this and requests Sardath's aid, knowing full well of the risk. The machine activates, and then Big Blue finds himself leapfrogging through a dreamscape full of his own thoughts and memories. In the end, Superman is reminded of why he's doing all of this in the first place, and successfully tracks down the Zeta beam's point of origin. The scientist Sardath is amazed by this and asks Big Blue how he's able to do it. Superman responds, telling the scientist it was just luck really, and then he flies off to the Bode Galaxy, thus ending the first issue. Issue 2, Part 3, Fight, begins with Superman in a brutal boxing match against Mido, who's struggling to keep up with the Man of Steel. By the 12th and final round, Big Blue had exhausted his opponent and discouraged him by telling Mido that he doesn't know a thing about him and that he will not fall. Realizing what he got himself into, Mido turns to the referee, battered, bloody, and broken, and he has him start the count, effectively naming Superman the winner. Part 4 alone picks up with Superman drifting through deep space, unconscious and badly injured. Out of nowhere, an alien ship spots him and picks him up. Then the captain orders the healer to save Big Blue's life if he can. Unfortunately, the task of reviving Superman was too much for the healer, who almost lost his life in the attempt. The captain of the ship understands the situation and plans to dump Big Blue off at the next way station. As the healer returns to his private quarters, he begins to relive Superman's memories of the many times he saved the people of Earth and, of course, his love, Lois Lane. Unable to rest due to his conscience, the healer returns to the last son of Krypton and sacrifices himself, mending his wounds. Superman, now fully revived, wakes up just in time to hear the final thoughts of the healer. Big Blue then finds the healer's home to give his condolences to his family. Once there, the issue ends with Superman apologizing to the healer's wife and 3 kids, telling them that his last thought was that he wanted them to know that all can be lost, but none are alone. Issue 3, Part 5, The 1,000 Deaths of Lois Lane, kicks off with Superman passed out at the way station, dreaming about the multiple scenarios where the love of his life, Lois Lane, dies because he wasn't there to swoop in and save her. In his nightmares, Lois gets gunned down by Lex Lex Luthor. She dies in a plane crash with Jimmy Olsen. She gets murked by the Joker, blown up by Toyman, her neck snapped by General Zod, and so on. After dreaming of the various ways she dies during horrendous circumstances, Superman is snapped awake by the booth operator calling him over to the desk. The two have a quick back and forth about the spelling of Superman when finally Big Blue is able to enter a booth of his own to make a galaxy long distance call. Superman then enters his own booth and calls Lois, who immediately picks up. The two lovebirds have a brief conversation that ends with Lois and Jimmy chasing down a story about some robo-robbers dropping 7 bodies in downtown Metropolis. Before she cuts the call, Lois quickly tells Clark that she misses him dearly and to hurry up and find the girl. Part 6, just a little farther, begins in World War II, where U.S. officer Sergeant Rock can be seen carrying Superman across a war-torn battlefield while fending off Nazi scum. The two stop in a ditch for a moment to breathe. Superman then wakes up having no recollection of who he is or his past, only that he comes from Kansas. While still in the foxhole, Sarge gives Big Blue an extra army uniform to wear and a pair of glasses. Once the two had regrouped with the team, Sergeant Rock informs Clark that he and his men have been given orders to cross Death Valley and take St. Ruth's Church found at the top of the hill. The mission begins as Easy Company advances on their objective. Superman, who is dubbed Kansas by Sarge, is saved from getting hit by a mortar shell. Unfortunately, Sergeant Rock was hit with shrapnel, but he ignores the pain and marches on, followed closely by his troops. Soon, Easy Company is pinned down once again in another foxhole by the Nazis. Suddenly, an armed stick grenade lands just a few feet away from the troops. Without thinking, Kansas picks up the armed grenade and attempts to throw it back at the fascists. However, before he could huck it, the grenade goes off in his face. Thanks to the explosion, Clark's memory returns. He quickly changes back into his Superman suit and aids Easy Company in finishing off the Nazi cowards. As Sergeant Rock and Superman fight side by side, Big Blue explains who he is, what he is doing, and how he fell through a hole in space-time which sent him to the Great War. Sarge eventually believes him, and the two part ways after a successful mission, concluding the 3rd issue in this miniseries. In issue 4, part 7, Run, we find little orphan girl Alice chained up sitting in a prison cell with 4 shackled aliens surrounding her as she clings onto her Superman action figure for comfort. To cope with her current situation, she begins reminiscing about the time she watched Superman and the Flash race around the world for charity. She proceeds to tell her cellmates how everyone and their grandparents knew that the Flash was going to win the race because he's the fastest man alive. She respectfully disagrees. In her mind, Alice has no doubt that Superman was going to win. Alice then talks about Lex's wager and how even though it looked like Superman was going to lose the race due to being behind on laps, she knew he was going to pull through anyways, and he did. After the flashback ends, she admits she knows that she's alone, meaning that she knows she's stuck in a room full of aliens who starved to death. Part 8, Man and Superman, begins with Big Blue getting struck by space lightning, which splits him into 2 separate beings, Clark Kent, now fully human, and Kal-El, now fully Kryptonian. Kal-El saves Clark before he dies from the vacuum of space by taking him to a nearby inhabitable planet. Once there, Kal-El, who is now cold, calculating, and pragmatic, tells Clark that he is going to take a day to set up food, water, and shelter for him. Then he will inform the Green Lantern Corps of Clark's situation. Then he will return to Earth. He then brings Clark some supper and asks if he has any questions for him. Clark, barely looking up from the campfire, asks about Alice, to which he receives no response from the Kryptonian. The following day, Clark wakes up in the cave alone that Kal had built for him using his heat vision the night before. Floating at the entrance of the cave was the Kryptonian himself. He informs Clark that there's no reason to save the girl, but Clark's not having any of it. Kal-El tries to make the case that one life, her life specifically, is a distraction and not worth saving. As time passes on, the two continue to argue back and forth on the matter, demonstrating the characteristics between Clark and Kal, as well as their inner conflict. Without Clark Kent's humanity and compassion, Kal is no better than General Zod. Without Kal-El's strength and abilities, Clark has no chance of rescuing himself, let alone Alice. The issue closes with Clark and Kal heading back out into space together, hoping to get struck by space lightning again. Issue 5, Part 9, If Not an Angel, begins with Superman on the planet Apocalypse making a deal with Darkseid himself. The bargain is as follows. Superman will kill a guy, let's call him Gary, and in exchange, Darkseid will provide Big Blue with the current whereabouts of Alice. Reluctantly, Superman agrees and flies off to an unnamed planet where he finds a dying alien ready to take his own life. When Big Blue arrives, he finds Gary, who assumes Superman is an angel, and he embraces death. As a last wish, Gary asks Superman to soothe him by telling him a tale. While holding a sacrificial knife, Big Blue begins recanting all the events that led him up to this point. Superman tells Gary how he went to Apocalypse to get answers and instead found a fight. Big Blue describes how he beat Steppenwolf, Calabac, and Kanto. Then he tells Gary about the pact he made with Darkseid to break his one rule. Cut back to the planet Apocalypse. Superman arrives telling Darkseid that the job is done. The villain accuses Big Blue of lying, to which Superman says, "If it is a lie, then I have broken my word. If it is the truth, then I have broken my word." The part ends with Superman telling Darkseid that the villain had won and that it is time for him to hold up his end of the bargain. Part 10, the offer starts with Clark Kent waking up at home with Lois Lane in his arms. He then rolls out of bed and throws on his Superman suit. As Lois talks about the article she's currently working on, Superman says his morning goodbyes to her and heads off to court to testify against his arch nemesis, Lex Luthor. Afterwards, Clark heads off to work at the Daily Planet. Once there, Clark began writing about corruption in the government. As he's typing away, he starts reminiscing about saving a cat out of a tree, playing with kids at the local park, and the many times he spent having lunch with Batman and Wonder Woman. At the end of the issue, it's revealed that Clark hasn't made it back home to Earth yet, that in fact all of this has been taking place in a computer simulation that is being run by the same alien who kidnapped Alice. The alien, let's call him the Grabber, offers Superman his resources to find peace via simulation or in real life. In exchange, Big Blue must give up his quest to save the little orphan girl from Gotham. Superman appreciates the offer, but he respectfully declines. Issue 6, Part 11, In Need, kicks off with Superman still bound in chains while the Grabber attempts to reason with him. Meanwhile, back in Gotham City, Batman calls Wonder Woman, confirming that the Earth is currently being invaded by alien robots developed by none other than the Grabber himself. As the heroes of Earth fail to thwart the battalion of androids, Superman breaks free and defeats the Grabber, who's revealed to be an alien sentient robot who controls an entire army of bots. After Big Blue crushes his foe, all the invading forces on Earth immediately shut down. Back on Earth, Batman radios the entire Justice League, telling them that they won thanks to Superman. When asked how he could possibly know that, Bats responds stating, "We were in need, and he's Superman." Cut to the prison cell, Alice is telling herself that Superman will come, that no matter what, he won't give up on her. Just as Alice says to herself that she is going home, Superman demolishes a wall directly across from where she is sitting. He simply looks at her and says, "Yes, ma'am, you are." Part 12, Questions and Answers, begins in the prison cell where Alice, now free, is being dressed by Superman in a spacesuit that's conveniently her size. She asks how far Earth is from where they are. Big Blue tells her that they are on the other side of the universe, so it's pretty far. He tells her that the radios that they have will help them communicate with each other during their journey home, and that if she has any questions along the way, she may ask them. After promising Alice that she will not get hurt, Superman picks up his traveling companion and flies up in the sky. As the trip begins, the adorable little orphan girl starts asking Big Blue how his powers work. He tells her that the yellow solar energy charges up his DNA, granting him his abilities. The pair return to the unknown planet where it's revealed that Superman never actually killed Gary, that in fact Big Blue found a way to cure him of his deadly illness. Gary thanks Big Blue for his help, then Superman and Alice continue on their journey through the stars. As they were leaving orbit, Alice wanted to know why Gary was crying, so Superman tells her his story. She then asks Big Blue why he helped Gary, and follows up by inquiring, don't others need Superman's help? Finally, Alice wanted to know if he was going to help everyone. Superman responds by telling her that he helped Gary because he needed it. Yes, other people do need his help, and no, he's not going to help everybody, but he's going to try. After traveling for some time, the pair stops to make camp. Before the little girl fell asleep, she wanted to know who would win in a fight, him or Batman. At first, Superman tells her that the Joker would win, but after the two share a laugh, he admits Batman would actually win. The following day, the pair are confronted by a space pirate with a silly name. Big Blue beats him, and then he and Alice find themselves at an alien restaurant eating some well-deserved grub. Later on, as the two approach Earth, Alice wanted to ask Superman a bunch more questions, to which he responds warmly. As they touch down back in Metropolis at what seems to be an orphanage, the questions cease. Superman, troubled by this, asks if Alice has any more questions for him. She responds by telling Big Blue that she knew better than to ask her final question, which is, why did he leave everything behind to save her? Because she already knew the answer. It's because you're Superman, she said while hugging the Man of Steel as the sun sets behind them, thus ending the final issue and concluding the story. Now on to the pros and cons. Number 1 on our pros list. The story is straightforward. Superman's goal is to rescue an orphan girl who is locked in a cell in a different galaxy altogether. While some parts get absolutely wild and campy, like in Part 8, Man or Superman, the overall plot remains intact. Personally, I like to think of it as a mini TV series where all the silly bits of the comic are really just filler episodes or content, if you will. Number 2 on our pros list. Tom and Andy beautifully illustrated Superman's strengths, weaknesses, and most importantly, his character within every page. A prime example of this is in issues 2 and 6, where Superman looks like an absolute beast in the ring, not to mention the fact that he stays true to his core aspects and principles by refusing to kill Gary for Darkseid. For the final pro on our list, we have Easter eggs. Yeah, I don't know about y'all, but I can't help but give props for the sheer amount of Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the story. I mean, you got the nod to the Kingdom Come storyline when Joker kills Lois, the hat tip to Richard Lester's Big Blue when he fought himself in Superman 3, and once again paying tribute to the legend Christopher Reeve by having Big Blue save a cat from a tree just like in Richard Donner's Superman 78. Alright, now let's talk about the cons. For number 1 on our list is the hole in space-time. Is it like a Kelvin timeline situation, only instead of OG Spock going back in time, it's Superman? Like, not to be a nagging Karen here, but how does Superman even get back to his own time? You know, and does his actions in the past even have an effect on the present? Personally, I hope not, because then it would be similar to when he flew around the world and turned back time, which is a silly concept to me. For number 2 on our list, we have what happened to Alice after the story. The series itself is set in a different timeline concurrent with the canon timeline, so it's free to end how it wants. At least that's just my opinion. So why not show her getting a new family? Legit, all we see is Superman drop her off at an orphanage in Metropolis, and that's it. That's all we get. And it's just disappointing to me. At least in my headcanon, Lois and Clark adopt her, and she grows up to look like Taylor Buck, who played Nat Irons in Superman and Lois. For our third and final con on our list, we have, why the hell did a robot kidnap Alice? For real, I've read the story 5 times now, and still there's no rational explanation. If the grabber needed a human to study, then why not take an adult? Not gonna lie, I originally thought Darkseid was responsible, but nope. He wasn't. Legit, all Darkseid did was just take advantage of the situation and try to break Superman. Personally, I would have made Brainiac the one responsible for kidnapping Alice to lure Superman into a trap. Now for final thoughts. Tom King once again proves that he understands the assignment better than most. Superman Up in the Sky is written with such clarity, compassion, and emotional precision that, just like with James Gunn's Superman, it brings the character's core aspects and principles back into focus. King reminds us of why Superman endures, not because of his powers, but because of his heart, his hope, and his unshakable belief in doing the right thing, even when it costs him everything. And none of that would have landed without Kubert, whose artwork elevates every bit of the story. Andy Kubert balances big cosmic spectacle with intimate character-driven emotion, delivering panels that feel both epic and deeply human. His line work gives the Odyssey its epic scale, while his expressions give it its soul. Together, Tom King and Andy Kubert created a Superman story that isn't just memorable, it feels timeless, even though the miniseries came out back in 2019 and 2020. This is definitely number 2 on my Mount Rushmore of Superman stories. Definite 9.5 out of 10, peak writing and artwork across the board, and if you're a parent or guardian, I highly recommend getting this for your kids 9 and up. Now before we end things off here, I want to take a moment to show some appreciation for my best friend, Forever Fighter, who encouraged me to pursue my passions and is also a massive Superman fan. You are an inspiration in the goat snow. I appreciate you. Another person I'd like to give special thanks to is my brother Cranked At Melody for coming up with the title of the series, Cover to Cover. You're a tremendous help and a legend, Kimosabe. I appreciate you. What did you think of the comic? Let us know below, and until next time.